Welcome to the Conceive, Believe, and Achieve podcast, where we delve into the minds of elite athletes and coaches to uncover their secrets behind their success. I'm your host, Sean Garris, former university wrestling coach, D1 wrestler, national champion, Olympic trials medalist, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, three-time world team coach in grappling, and author. Join me as we explore the realms of training, mindset, goal setting, overcoming adversity, and various coaching methodologies in the world of sports. We're here at the University of Michigan with former swimming coach Jim Richardson. This is our third time with Jim. He's been a guest on the show, two other times. This is the third. Third time's a charm, I guess.
Hopefully.
Very popular talks that we have, I will tell you that, a lot of downloads. So I wanted to get back and I wanted to talk with you about leadership and, of course, culture. You've been here at the University of Michigan. You spent a lot of time here. I think it was 27 years.
Coaching. I came in 1980, fall of 85.
Fall of 85. And in that time, 14-time Big Ten champions, right? As well as two Coach of the Years with...
few Big Tens, couple NCAAs.
I love it. All right. Okay, so you're the man to talk to about swimming around here, but I just don't want to just talk about swimming. I want to talk about coaching because a lot of the stuff that we've talked about before, I'll tell you the truth, I've learned a lot, and I've actually pushed it into my wrestling as well. Just effort. We talked about before about effort and attitude. Those are things that I harp on with my kids. So I want to talk to you, one, about maybe like when you're coming to a school like this and you are you accept the job, how did you come in and approach building culture or leading your team?
I adopted the stance of I'm going to come in and I'm going to observe. I'm going to see who I think is leading the team, who's following, what the quality of that leadership is, and how it's driving the culture of the team. I knew ahead of time, speaking to the former head coach, that there were some issues, but I didn't want to be a bull in the china shop. I wanted to give those people who were looking for a new start the opportunity. And so I was very, conservative from the standpoint of just laying back and seeing, where this team was with respect to its maturity level. Unfortunately, the previous coach was right. For many of the swimmers, maturity level was very low. So you saw behaviors that you would see with average people on a college campus, out of bounds behavior on weekends, sometimes Friday nights prior to Saturday practice. In my recruiting, I spent a lot of time talking to potential recruits about the kind of culture I was trying to build. So I told them, if you see a conflict between what I'm telling you and what you're seeing on this visit, I'm going to tell you that if what you're seeing is out of bounds, we're not going to tolerate it when we find out about it. So the first year was okay. We swam all right. The next year, we brought in a really large freshman class, and 99% of them were high character people. And we won Big Tens. So all of a sudden, when you start winning, it's easier to talk about, okay, how did we get here? And what were the behaviors that allowed us to reach this level? And how are we going to sustain it? So that's what happened when I first came here.
Mm-hmm. So you obviously, when you got here, you thought, okay, you did the observation and you did notice some things. Did you implement change? Or how did you implement change when it came to that, dealing with the behaviors?
More of it, I can't ever recall, honestly, anybody having been caught out of bounds. Mm-hmm. But I had people telling me things aren't the way they should be. Mm-hmm. So I had to make my position very clear that if people were going to get caught with out-of-bounds behavior, there were going to be repercussions. That's just my philosophy. And if that isn't what you signed up for because you came here before I did, that's okay. I'll help you go somewhere else where your behavior patterns fit the culture of that program. But it's not going to fit here. Just will not fit.
Mm-hmm. Now, I remember talking with you last time, and you had mentioned there were some issues with drinking. And of course, that's natural for a college campus. But what kind of, that kind of behavior, one, how does it affect an athlete? Not just a swimmer, I guess, because it's this podcast for everybody, not just swimmers. How does it affect their training, mindset, etc.?
I'm going to tell you honestly, it depends on the athlete, because I have seen world-class gold medalists, world record holders abuse alcohol. I've seen it. So anybody who tells you that it's the kiss of death, if you're that gifted, you can get away with a lot to reach a certain level. Could you have been better? Arguably, yes. But I think the toll that kind of behavior takes on you is it compromises your character, because you're out of bounds, and you've developed a lifestyle where being out of bounds is okay. And until something pulls you back in bounds, you're probably going to stay out of bounds. So, my philosophy was, we talked about drinking a lot. And oddly enough, I grew up overseas, and then I was an exchange student in South America, where the families have what they call onces in the afternoon, where the kids, once they reach 13, they'll get a Tom Collins. Dad will come home from work. He'll have a cocktail or a beer or something. So they're reared in the home to understand the role that drinking has in their house. And they understand also it's an embarrassment to your family if you're in public and you're drunk. That's a big embarrassment to your family. So that was a big part of their culture. So I actually shared that with the teams. And I told them, I know what goes on this campus on weekends. It doesn't make any difference whether you're 21 or 18. You can get pretty much anything you want on any college campus in this country. I told them, I said, my attitude towards alcohol is, if I had to equate it to something, I would equate it to chocolate milk. And they would look at me funny, and I would go, I've never seen anybody walk into a restaurant and slam a $20 bill down on the counter and say, pour me a chocolate milk and keep them coming. It just, so if your attitude about alcohol is the same as it is towards chocolate milk, I can take it. I can leave it. Because what I was after was for them to develop a responsible attitude towards alcohol. And if they were going to use it, do not allow yourself to place yourself in a position of jeopardy. And that you all as teammates, you have responsibility for each other. That's part of being on a team. And there were some times in subsequent years where, and of course with the women's team, it's really, really important for them to not allow their sisters to get out of control and not be in control of themselves, because that places them in jeopardy either at the party or on the way home from the party. So they did a really good job of taking care of one another. And a lot of times it would be a one-off with a freshman, and they would sit down with them and say, that can't happen again. And as far as I know, we only lost one swimmer who just could not accept that in all of my time here.
How unfortunate. Well, good that it's only one.
Yep.
One is definitely unfortunate.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Other pitfalls that you would deal with, anything?
It's interesting that jealousy would creep in every now and then, especially when it had to do with who was elected captain and who wasn't. The coaches, we never had a vote for captains. But we went through a list of the characteristics that you think a good captain should have before we would allow them to vote. We always voted in the spring because it was fresh in everybody's mind how people operated during the year. I didn't want incoming freshmen in the fall to vote for captains. They don't know these people that well yet. So we always voted in the spring. And I think for the most part, we had good captains. We had some years where we had exceptional captains. And the years when we didn't, I could not turn over leadership to the team. Couldn't do it. And it kind of goes back to this philosophy of what's the maturity level of the organization. The more immature the people are as a leader, the more authoritarian you have to be. You set the guardrails, you maintain them, and you constantly praise when necessary or correct when necessary, or, excuse people from the team for a while, which is the kiss of death in swimming because they can't train. They don't walk on their hands, so they start to get out of shape. The more mature your team is, the more authoritative you can be. Meaning, all right, this is what I think from this and experience. Give me some feedback. How do you feel that works for you? Either one-on-one or as a team. And that is an engaging, authoritative approach to building your team. When we had those years, I didn't have to worry about behavior. I could coach. I didn't have a little cloud hanging over me going, I wonder what's going on tonight, and I wonder if these people are getting on with one another. But when people laid aside petty things and jealousy about who got elected captain, who didn't, when we laid those things aside and people had the attitude, I want to do what's best for the team. I saw a clip from one of Nick Saban's talks, not to his team, but to a group. And it was really interesting to me. He said, I used to ask my players, when you pray, do you pray to be blessed? Or when you pray, do you pray to be a blessing to others? And that kind of sums up, where are you? Are you trying to be a blessing to this team and how you train, your behaviors, the things you talk about? And to do that in an environment that's, it's a really heterogeneous university environment. To create something very special like that, it's not easy. It's not easy. And a lot of them coming out of high school, I want that, but I don't know how to do it because that wasn't what we were as a school or as a team. So trying to create that kind of environment, that culture, that special culture, you have to work at it constantly.
You said that you had heard through the previous swim coach that there may be some problems on the team. Did you have that arsenal already ready, or how did you prepare? Or were you already prepared?
I had a little bit of an arsenal. I had assistant coached at Iowa for 3 years, but I'd been a club coach for 9 years. And so we had age groupers to high school kids. And there was a time when I had to discipline my senior team because they were great kids, but they did something that was out of bounds. Nobody got hurt. To my knowledge, alcohol wasn't involved, but there was a lack of truth-telling to keep people in their lives. Not to me, but I found out about it. And we had some discussions, and they weren't happy about it. But, later on, several of them came back and said, I want you to know I appreciate that. especially when they had children of their own. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, definitely. Yeah. So talking about the previous experience at Iowa, you've already built a foundation. You come in here, you see a little bit of a mess. You start cleaning it up. That seems like a tough and arduous task for a new coach to come into. You said you had the championship that year. Did you kind of like, oh,
No.
you knew that there was going to be issues?
No. In 80, I came in the fall of 85, in Big Tens in 86. We were picked to be ninth. I think we finished fifth. And we had a couple of good freshmen on the team who really weren't a part of the previous culture. So I recruited really hard that year, in addition to trying to figure out what was going on with the team. But I think one of the most important people when it comes to the leadership of the team is your assistant coach. Because if you have a female assistant coach, she's usually cued in on what's going on. And they'll talk to the assistant coach about stuff they won't talk to the head coach about. My assistant coach was really cool, but she had swum at Michigan. And so she'd been a part of that. And actually, after getting to know me and us having some conversation, she decided this is probably not where I need to be. And we had 2 or 3 swimmers decide this is really not what I signed up for. And with a large freshman class coming in of a lot of them really great kids, really good students, it just kind of, the culture changed by virtue of the personalities of the people coming in. So it made it easier. It made it easier to talk about those things without people doing eye rolls, or anything like that. So it's about the people who make up your team and where are they coming from. And by the time they get to this age, their habits are pretty deeply ingrained. And it's very, very difficult to change somebody who's got a lot of out-of-bounds characteristics and pull them in. It's difficult. Some of them need therapy. I'm not a therapist. So.
But you do have therapists on staff.
Absolutely, yeah. And even then, some of them, it's just deeply ingrained. That's the way they've operated for 6 years, 5 years.
Yeah. How important is it for a coach to know their swimmers? Because some coaches will go in and just coach. I'm just going to teach technique. I'm just going to teach what I need to do. I don't care about the culture. I care about performance. Zero. Anything else to me is just a distraction.
I think if I were coaching now, I would do something different. I would add something to what we were doing. First of all, I would have taken a personality assessment a lot sooner. It would have taught me a lot more about, under pressure, what are my go-to behaviors. So I would understand myself better to begin with. I think every leader needs to do that first. And that means you have to have a pretty high level of vulnerability to be able to look at yourself, with a really good assessment, and sometimes with what's called a 360. Not only you assessing yourself, but have your assistant coaches and your administrator fill out an assessment on you so that you can see how they see me, because I'm seeing me this way. So you begin to understand yourself better, how you communicate, and whether what you're saying and how you're saying it is being received the way you intend it to. The next thing I would do is I would encourage everybody on the team to do an assessment too, the same assessment. Now, we did this with my teams a couple of times using True Colors, which is a Myers-Briggs type of assessment. And all you do is you get a score on each of the personality characteristics. And we did it in this room. So you start out with the first one, you say, okay, everybody who's this, who has a high score on this side of the room, arrange yourselves in numbers around the room in a U. So the highest and the lowest scores are facing each other. And then you read out, these people are da-da-na-na-na-na-na-na. And when we did that, it was so interesting to see the people looking at each other going, especially the ones with the low score and the high score, they're looking at each other going, oh. And sometimes you're going, I just thought she was a jerk. No, that's, and then you read out, these people operate this way, and their strengths are this. And then you ask the group, why do we need these people on our team? Under what kind of situations are these people going to be a real asset to us because they operate this way naturally? Okay? And you do it for all of them, so all of a sudden everybody has a deeper level of understanding of why people are the way they are, as opposed to making assumptions. And so when you do that, then I think you just have a deeper level of understanding of who my teammates are and why they're that way and why we need them. So, because I'm not good at that. We need them because they're really good at that. So I would have done that if I'd known about it at the time. I absolutely would have done that, and it made a big difference. I got away from it for a few years, and because I thought we were good. When you get away from what I call rituals now, when you get away from rituals that reinforce who we are, what we stand for, and how we operate, when you start to abandon those rituals, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. And I'm absolutely convinced of that. That's why a lot of people look at rituals. Now, rituals, well, it depends on what your rituals are and what do they reinforce. And the term we use is systems of alignment. Alignment to what? Your team values, your team purpose. So what kind of systems do you have? Debriefs, end of season banquet, post-meet talks, onboarding. Used to call it initiation, call it onboarding now. How do you onboard your people? And is that a system of alignment to what you say your values are that are not compromisable? So I wish I'd done those things earlier, and I wish I'd been more consistent in doing them.
I'm listening to you talk. I'm listening about the way you kind of started to run the show. I guess, when you first came in, and a lot of it was kind of hands off. You're watching, like you said. It sounds like you gave a lot of trust to your team. I come from an environment, as you know, I'm a police officer, where there's not a lot of trust. Yeah. And it's often a leader will come in. We have turnovers all the time with leaders. We get new leaders, and what ends up happening is there are some leaders that come in with a heavy hand, change everything. How does that behavior, in your opinion, affect the team? How would that affect the team? Have you come into this school and said, you know what, I've heard all this crap's going on, we're going to do it this way?
The people who are mature want to be trusted. And if you come in with a heavy hand, you're going to turn off the people who could be your leaders because they want to be trusted. But you're not trusting them. So they silo. I want to have an effect on this, but they're not letting me. So, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But inside, it's like, this is not the kind of person I am. I don't need to have somebody stand over my shoulder and look at me. Now, there's kind of a paradigm. There's a grid I've used at times where your leadership style versus the maturity level again. And if you have a low maturity person, which means they can't be trusted, you have to be authoritarian with them. You have to put boundaries around them. If you have a low maturity person, but you have an authoritative person who wants to trust them, that's bad. That's bad for them. And it's bad for the team. If you have a high maturity person, but you have an authoritarian leader, that's bad for them, as I just explained. They're not going to thrive in that kind of environment. The best environment is to have a high maturity person with an authoritative leader. And then you've got this synergy that happens where the leader realizes, I've got people here who've got talents. They can be trusted. They're going to make us better. I've got some people here, I can't with them. So this kind of a myth that, like, we trained on the Navy SEAL base one year, and I've seen buds. I've seen them get up in the morning and get sprayed and run into the ocean and do sugar cookies and just get abused for a week. But that's weeding out. That's weeding out. It's kind of like a personality assessment, and they know what they're looking for. Once that's over, I've seen the evolutions then, and it's the teaching. It's getting some feedback. It's trust. And these people now have earned the trust because they've been through hell. Buds is tough. So I think a lot of coaches still tend to operate that way. Initially, I'm just going to put everybody through hell, and I'm going to see what cream rises to the top. But that's to make the assumption that everybody who's a good swimmer is tough as nails, mentally maybe. It's not true. It's not true. There's some people you have to love into doing their best. And there are other people you have to be more demanding with. That's just human nature. So to put everybody in the same box initially is not my style. I think you have to treat each person as an individual. So trying to meet with them one-on-one. Well, actually, you never meet one-on-one, especially if you're coaching a women's team. You always have your assistant coach in with you. And you just ask questions about family. Growing up, what do you do away from the pool? What interests you? Academically, why did you pick Michigan? What are you here for? After you graduate, where would you see yourself in 1, 2, 3 years? Doing what? With what kind of people? What kind of an organization? So you start to get a bit of a feel for what's important to them. And just and at the end you might say, well, what do you hope to accomplish in swimming? And that was my recruiting style too. We lost a lot of people who trying to make the Olympic team was more important than the education they were going to get. And they didn't perceive me as someone who's going to place that ahead of that or the kind of person they were. So that's okay. We protected our culture.
Because bringing in somebody like that could potentially have some detriment too.
I did it once, and I tried to do my homework, and it just did not work out. It was horrible. But talent, oh my goodness. We'd never had anybody more talented. Didn't work out.
No. Thank you for tuning into the Conceive, Believe, and Achieve podcast. I hope you found today's episode insightful and inspiring. Your support means the world to us, so don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and leave a comment in the section below. Your feedback fuels our journey to bring you more valuable content and stories from the realm of sports. Until next time, keep pushing boundaries, believing in yourself, and achieving greatness. Thank you for listening.